The Unexpected Reunion. Washington, D.C., November 1963. Gray clouds hang low over the Capitol, threatening rain. The streets glisten from an earlier shower, reflecting the muted light of a cold autumn afternoon. Inside the Army-Navy Club on Farragut Square, retired military officers gather for what has become a monthly tradition, lunch and reminiscences of wars fought and won. The main dining room buzzes with conversation. Men in their 70s and 80s, some walking with canes, others still upright and proud, fill the mahogany-paneled space. The smell of cigar smoke mingles with roasted beef and aged whiskey. At a corner table, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery sits alone, nursing a scotch. At 76, he remains as meticulously groomed as ever, his gray mustache trimmed with precision, his posture military straight despite the years. His blue eyes, still sharp, scan the room with the same analytical intensity that once surveyed battlefields across North Africa and Europe. He's been living in semi-retirement in England, but this trip to Washington for a NATO advisory meeting has brought him back to American soil for the first time in 5 years. The nostalgia is overwhelming, yet tinged with something he won't admit, loneliness. Montgomery? Is that really you, you old warhorse? The voice cuts through the ambient noise like a tank through thin armor. Montgomery turns, and his carefully composed expression falters for just a moment. Standing before him, leaning heavily on an ornate walking stick, is General George S. Patton, Jr. But this is not the Patton that Montgomery remembers from their contentious relationship during World War II. The man before him has been weathered by time and, clearly, by something more profound than age. Patton's once commanding frame appears diminished, his shoulders slightly hunched. His famous pearl-handled revolvers are absent, replaced by a simple dark suit that hangs looser than it should. His face, always animated with aggressive confidence, now carries lines of exhaustion and something that looks unsettlingly like defeat. Patton. Montgomery stands, extending his hand with British formality. I'd heard you'd retired to California. What brings you to Washington? Patton's grip is still firm, but there's a tremor Montgomery doesn't remember. Medical appointments at Walter Reed, Patton says, his legendary voice now raspier, quieter. The old body isn't what it used to be. They're running tests. An awkward silence settles between them. 2 decades of rivalry, disagreements over strategy, and clashing personalities create an invisible wall. Montgomery remembers the heated arguments over Operation Market Garden, the race to Berlin, the constant competition for resources and glory. Patton had called him overly cautious, Montgomery had considered Patton reckless and undisciplined. Sit down, Montgomery says finally, surprising himself. Join me. Patton hesitates, then slowly lowers himself into the opposite chair, wincing slightly. A waiter appears immediately. Bourbon. Neat. Make it a double, Patton orders. Then, catching Montgomery's raised eyebrow, he adds, don't start with me, Monty. The doctors have already said their piece. Montgomery says nothing, merely sips his scotch. The waiter departs, and another silence descends. Around them, other veterans laugh and exchange stories. Montgomery and Patton sit like 2 islands in a sea of camaraderie, separated by history and pride. So, Patton begins, his fingers drumming on the table, a nervous habit Montgomery recognizes from war councils long ago. Still living in Hampshire? Yes. Islington Mill. Quiet. Peaceful. Montgomery's clipped British accent carries its usual precision. And you? How is California treating you? It's warm. Sunny. Everything England isn't. There's no humor in Patton's voice, just statement of fact. Beatrice wanted to be near our daughters. The grandchildren. Montgomery notices Patton didn't say he wanted to be near family. He notices other things too, the way Patton's hand shakes slightly as he reaches for the bourbon the waiter has delivered, the grayish pallor beneath his weathered tan, the way his eyes seem to focus on something far beyond the dining room walls. How is Beatrice? Montgomery asks, making an effort at courtesy. Dead. 3 years ago. Patton states it flatly, without emotion, but his jaw tightens. Cancer. Montgomery feels an unexpected pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Why would you? Patton takes a long drink. We weren't exactly pen pals, Monty. Another silence. This one heavier. Montgomery clears his throat. And your health? You mentioned tests. Patton stares at his bourbon, swirling it slowly. For a long moment, Montgomery thinks he won't answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. They think it's cancer. Pancreatic, maybe. Maybe liver. They're not sure yet. He looks up, and Montgomery is shocked to see vulnerability in those famously fierce eyes. Hell of a thing, surviving 4 wars just to get taken down by your own body. Montgomery doesn't know what to say. The British Reserve that has served him well through decades of military and social situations suddenly feels inadequate. Before he can formulate a response, Patton continues. You know what the worst part is, Monty? It's not the pain. It's not even the dying. Patton leans forward, his voice gaining a hint of its old intensity. It's the regret. The things left unsaid. The bridges I burned because I was too damn proud or too damn stubborn to admit I might have been wrong about something. Montgomery shifts uncomfortably. This conversation is veering into territory he's not prepared for. Emotional vulnerability has never been his strength. We all have regrets, he offers carefully. Do we? Patton's eyes lock onto his. Or do some of us just refuse to admit them? The challenge hangs in the air between them. Montgomery feels his old defensiveness rising but forces it down. Something about Patton's condition, his obvious suffering, demands a different response than their usual sparring. What exactly are you saying, George? It's the first time Montgomery has used Patton's first name in perhaps 20 years. Patton drains his bourbon and signals for another. I'm saying that when you're staring down the barrel of your own mortality, you start seeing things differently. You start wondering if all those arguments, all that competition, all that pride, if any of it really mattered. Of course it mattered. We won the war. We won the war, Patton agrees. But at what cost to ourselves? To our relationships? To our humanity? He laughs bitterly. Listen to me. I sound like one of those philosophy professors I used to mock. Montgomery studies the man across from him. This is not the George Patton of legend, the profane, aggressive, glory-seeking warrior who believed himself a reincarnation of ancient military heroes. This is a man who has been stripped down to something more essential and more human. Why did you really approach me, George? Montgomery asks quietly. Of all the men in this room, why sit with me? Patton is silent for a long moment. The waiter delivers his second bourbon, and he stares at it without drinking. Because, he finally says, of all the men I've known, you're the one I treated worst. And you're the one I most need to talk to. Montgomery feels his throat tighten unexpectedly. I wasn't exactly gracious to you either. No, you weren't. Patton manages a weak smile. We were a right pair of egotistical bastards, weren't we? Despite himself, Montgomery almost smiles. That's one way to put it. Monty, I need to ask you something. Patton's voice drops even lower. And I need you to be honest. Can you do that? I've always been honest with you. Brutally so, some might say. Did you ever respect me? As a soldier, I mean. Not as a person, I know we couldn't stand each other personally. But as a soldier. As a commander. Did you ever think I was anything more than a reckless cowboy who got lucky? The question catches Montgomery completely off guard. In all their years of rivalry, through all their disagreements and conflicts, Patton has never asked for his opinion, never seemed to care what anyone thought of him. The vulnerability in the question, the genuine need for validation, is staggering. Montgomery takes a long sip of his scotch, considering his answer carefully. Outside, rain begins to fall, drops sliding down the tall windows like tears. The dining room feels suddenly smaller, more intimate. "George," he begins, choosing his words with unusual care, "you were the finest tactical armor commander I ever witnessed in combat. Your ability to exploit breakthroughs, to move forces with speed and aggression, to strike fear into the enemy, it was extraordinary. I may have disagreed with your methods, with your showmanship, with your disregard for proper military protocol, but I never questioned your effectiveness as a combat leader." Patton stares at him, his expression unreadable. "Really? Really?" Montgomery discovers he means it. "My criticisms of you were always about caution versus risk, about preserving lives versus achieving objectives quickly. But if I had to choose someone to lead an armored thrust into enemy territory, to break through seemingly impossible defenses, to inspire men to achieve the impossible, I'd choose you. Every time." Something shifts in Patton's face. His eyes glisten, and he quickly looks away, blinking. That's the kindest thing you've ever said to me. Perhaps because we've never been honest with each other about what we actually thought." "No," Patton agrees. "We were too busy competing to be honest." They sit in silence again, but this time it's different. The wall between them has developed a crack. "You want to know something?" Patton says after a while. "Market Garden wasn't the disaster I always made it out to be." Montgomery's head snaps up. Market Garden, the operation he'd championed, the airborne assault into Holland that had ultimately failed to achieve its objectives. Patton had mocked it mercilessly, used it as evidence of Montgomery's overcaution and poor planning. "It was ambitious," Patton continues, "and ambitious operations sometimes fail. But it was the right kind of thinking, bold, potentially war-ending if it had worked. I gave you hell for it, but honestly, I was jealous that Eisenhower had given you the resources to try it instead of giving them to me." Montgomery is speechless. An apology from Patton, or as close to one as the man is probably capable of, about Market Garden. He never expected to hear it. "Your pursuit across France was brilliant," Montgomery finds himself saying. "The speed, the aggression, the way you kept the Germans off balance, it was exactly what the situation required. I criticized it as reckless at the time, but in retrospect, you were absolutely right to push as hard as you did." They look at each other across the table, two old warriors finally lowering their shields. "Why did we waste so much time fighting each other instead of fighting together?" Patton asks, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "Pride," Montgomery answers simply. "Mine as much as yours." "Mine more than yours," Patton corrects. "Let's be honest. I was insufferable. I am insufferable. It's who I've always been." "You were difficult," Montgomery agrees, "but so was I. I was rigid, inflexible, condescending. I treated you like a subordinate even when you weren't one, like a student who needed constant correction." Patton nods slowly. "You know what I realized in the hospital last week? When they were sticking tubes in me and running their damn tests. I realized that all the medals, all the victories, all the glory, none of it matters if you die alone with nothing but regrets. The raw honesty is almost painful to hear." Montgomery feels his own carefully constructed emotional defenses crumbling. "I have regrets too," he admits quietly. "Many of them. Including how I treated you." Patton reaches across the table, and Montgomery is startled when the American grasps his hand. The grip is weak, trembling, nothing like the powerful handshake from earlier. "Monty, I'm dying. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, but I'm dying. And before I do, I need to make some things right." Patton's voice cracks slightly. "I need you to know that despite everything, despite all our fights and all our competition, you were one of the greatest soldiers I ever served alongside. And I'm sorry, truly sorry, for every time I undermined you, mocked you, or made your job harder because of my own ego." Montgomery feels tears threatening, something that hasn't happened to him in decades. He doesn't pull his hand away. And I'm sorry for my arrogance, my dismissiveness, my inability to see past my own certainty that I was always right. You deserved better from me, George. You deserved respect and friendship, not constant criticism. They sit like that for a long moment, two aged warriors holding hands across a table in a half-empty dining room while rain falls outside and the ghosts of their shared past swirl around them. 2 hours later, they're still talking. The dining room has emptied considerably, but neither man notices. They've moved past apologies into reminiscence, sharing stories they've never shared before, laughing at memories that once seemed painful, finding common ground in experiences they'd never properly discussed. Do you remember that meeting in March of '45? Patton is saying, his voice stronger now, animated by memory. When Eisenhower announced the plan for the final push into Germany? The one where you threw your helmet across the room? Montgomery actually smiles. How could I forget? I didn't throw it across the room. I set it down firmly. You threw it, George. It dented the wall. Patton grins, the first genuine grin Montgomery has seen from him today. Okay, maybe I threw it a little. But you were so smug about getting priority for the northern thrust. I was not smug. I was professionally satisfied. You were smug as hell, and you know it. They're both laughing now, and it feels surreal. After decades of hostility, they're laughing together like old friends. You want to know something else? Patton says, his laughter fading into something more serious. That night, after that meeting, I went back to my quarters and admitted to myself that your plan was probably smarter than mine. More likely to succeed. Safer for the men. Did you really? Really? But I couldn't tell you that then. Couldn't let you be right. Montgomery shakes his head. What a waste. All those years of fighting when we could have been collaborating. Yeah. Patton stares at his empty glass. What a waste. The rain outside has intensified, drumming against the windows. Montgomery glances at his watch and is shocked to see it's nearly 5 o'clock. They've been talking for 4 hours. George, you should get back to the hospital. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. Patton pushes himself slowly to his feet, grimacing. But this was good. Better than good. Montgomery stands as well. When do you get your test results? Next week. They're supposed to call me at my hotel. Where are you staying? The Mayflower. Room 412. Montgomery pulls out a card and scribbles on it. This is where I'm staying. The Hay Adams. I'm here for 3 more days. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow? Continue this conversation. Patton takes the card, studying it as if it's something precious. I'd like that very much, Monty. Very much. They shake hands again, and this time it feels different, not two competitors sizing each other up, but two old friends saying goodbye until tomorrow. Thank you, Patton says simply. For listening. For being honest. For giving me this. Thank you, Montgomery responds. For reminding me that it's never too late to make things right. Patton turns to leave, then stops. Monty. One more thing. Yes. If I don't make it through this, if the cancer gets me, will you speak at my funeral? Say something honest about who I really was, not the legend but the man. Montgomery feels his throat tighten again. Only if you promise to do the same for me when my time comes. Patton's smile is sad but genuine. Deal. They part ways, Patton heading toward the lobby, Montgomery remaining at the table. As he watches the American's slow, painful progress toward the exit, Montgomery realizes something profound has shifted. The rivalry that defined their relationship has finally been replaced by something unexpected, genuine friendship. He signals for another scotch, sits back down, and stares out at the rain-soaked streets of Washington. For the first time in many years, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery allows himself to feel something other than pride and certainty. He allows himself to feel hope, hope that there's still time to heal old wounds, to build bridges instead of maintaining walls, to be human instead of merely being right. Outside, the rain continues to fall, washing away the dust of decades, cleaning the streets for whatever comes next. The truth between warriors. The Hay Adams Hotel, November 1963. Evening has settled over Washington, and the rain has given way to a cold, clear night. Montgomery's suite overlooks Lafayette Square and the White House beyond, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. Montgomery checks his watch for the third time in 10 minutes, 7:15 p.m. Patton is 15 minutes late, and Montgomery finds himself uncharacteristically anxious. Has something happened? Has Patton changed his mind? Or worse, has his condition deteriorated? He's arranged for dinner to be served in his suite rather than the hotel restaurant. Something about yesterday's conversation demands privacy, continuation without the interference of others' eyes and ears. The table by the window is set for two, candles waiting to be lit, a bottle of bourbon and a bottle of scotch standing at attention like soldiers awaiting orders. A knock at the door startles him from his thoughts. Patton stands in the hallway, looking better than yesterday but still not well. He's changed into a different suit, navy blue, pressed, proper. There's a wan smile on his face. Sorry I'm late. The taxi driver got lost. Can you believe that? A DC taxi driver who doesn't know how to get to the Hay Adams. Come in, George. Montgomery steps aside, noting the careful way Patton moves, as if each step requires conscious effort. Once inside, Patton surveys the suite with an appreciative whistle. Nice digs, Monty. NATO must pay better than the U.S. Army. It's adequate. Montgomery gestures toward the seating area. Please, sit. Rest. Patton lowers himself into a leather armchair with visible relief. Montgomery pours bourbon without asking, hands the glass to Patton, then pours himself a scotch. The ritual feels natural, comfortable, as if they've done this 1,000 times before instead of never. How are you feeling today? Montgomery asks, settling into the opposite chair. Like death warmed over, if I'm being honest. Patton takes a sip of bourbon. But better than yesterday, surprisingly. I think our conversation did me more good than all the damn medicines the doctors keep pushing. Good. Montgomery raises his glass slightly. To honest conversations. To honest conversations, Patton echoes, and they drink. For a few minutes, they sit in companionable silence, watching the play of light across Lafayette Square. Finally, Patton speaks. I did a lot of thinking last night. About everything we talked about. About all those years of competition and conflict. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. There's something I need to tell you, Monty. Something I've never told anyone. Montgomery waits, sensing the importance of the moment. Do you remember Sicily? The race to Messina? Of course. Montgomery's voice is neutral, though the memory carries complicated emotions. The campaign in Sicily, where Patton had raced his 7th Army to capture Messina before Montgomery's British forces could arrive, had been a source of tremendous tension. That wasn't about tactics or strategy, Patton continues. That was about me trying to prove I was better than you. Trying to show the world, show Eisenhower, that I deserved respect, that I wasn't just some cavalry officer playing with tanks. He looks directly at Montgomery. I endangered my men with that race. I pushed them too hard, took risks I shouldn't have taken, all because I couldn't stand the thought of you getting there first. Montgomery absorbs this confession. Men died in that race. Yes. Patton's voice is hollow. Not many, but some. And every single one of those deaths was unnecessary. They died for my ego. You weren't alone in that, George. Montgomery sets down his glass carefully. I pushed my forces hard too. I wanted to reach Messina first just as badly. I told myself it was about maintaining British prestige, about proving that the Empire still had fight left in it. But really? It was about not letting you win. Patton looked surprised. I never knew you cared that much about beating me. I cared enormously. You terrified me. Now Patton looks genuinely shocked. I terrified you. The great Bernard Montgomery, victor of El Alamein, was terrified of me. Not physically, Montgomery clarifies. But professionally, yes. You represented everything I wasn't, bold where I was cautious, beloved by your men where I was respected but not loved, willing to take enormous risks where I needed certainty. You were what the Americans wanted their generals to be, aggressive, confident, victorious. And I was what the British needed but didn't particularly want, methodical, careful, professional. Patton absorbs this, his expression thoughtful. You know what's funny? I was just as scared of you. Of me? Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious, Monty. You had something I never did, the complete confidence of your superiors. Churchill trusted you. The British people trusted you. Even Eisenhower, who barely tolerated me most of the time, respected your military judgment. Patton's voice carries old pain. I was always one slap away from being sent home in disgrace. Montgomery knows what Patton is referring to, the famous incident in Sicily where Patton had slapped 2 soldiers suffering from what was then called battle fatigue, calling them cowards. The scandal had nearly ended his career.